Rodgers gets the snap. Blitz is on. Rodgers scrambles left, winds up rainbow. He's got Cobb at the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown and a dagger. Oh my goodness! An NFC North Division Championship dagger.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Real Packers Talk, the podcast dedicated to everything green and gold. I am your host, Ethan Peltier, and today I'm going to be giving my Week 3 preview. It's Green Bay at Tampa Bay, in what could very well be an early sneak peek at a potential playoff matchup. I definitely believe that the outcome of this game will help determine which seeds are ranked higher than others. So this is kind of a big game. I know it's only Week 3, but as far as the implications that this game has down the line, it is a big one. As far as key headlines going into this matchup go, obviously you've got Aaron Rodgers facing off against Tom Brady, which is not something we see all too often. I believe this is only the 5th time that they've played each other. So that in itself is kind of a big deal. Other than that, this is going to be Tampa Bay's home opener, so expect it to be a rowdy crowd, expect it to be another hostile road environment for the Green Bay Packers. And to be completely honest, Tampa Bay's kind of they've had a good start, to say the least. They're sitting at 2-0, and it doesn't really matter how you get those wins, they're still sitting at 2-0. The Packers are sitting at 1-1, and as I mentioned earlier, this is an early week matchup, but again, down the line, in the future, this is probably we're going to be looking back at this game, and depending on how it goes, we'll see how it shapes the rest of the season. Also going into this game, I do feel the need to mention the matchup that the Packers had against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few years back when we went to Tampa Bay, and it was one of those games where the Packers showed up, but they didn't show up, you know what I mean? Like, they got off the bus, they made it to the stadium, but that's about it. So I know ideally going into this, they'd not like to repeat that. They want to go into Tampa Bay and come out with a W. That's always ideal. Just thought I should mention it just because historically this team has struggled in the state of Florida, on the road in those hot games. So, again, knock on wood that it's not going to repeat itself, but had to mention it. So now that I've covered some of the narratives going into this game, let's talk about the injury report and then the predictions, keys to the game, all that stuff that I normally do in my game previews. So let's start with the injury report here. Looking at the Green Bay Packers, it's a long list. If I'm going to just go down the list, here it is as followed. Sammy Watkins was placed on IR this week. The earliest that he can return is Week 7. That's a huge blow, especially after the performance he had against the Bears last week. David Bakhtiari was listed, although I do believe that he is going to play tomorrow. I saw some reports today that that's the way that the Packers are leaning, which is huge. Allen Lazard is on the injury report. He's questionable with an ankle injury. Christian Watson's on the injury report. Randall Cobb was on the injury report this week with an illness, although I expect him to play. Mercedes Lewis. Kenny Clark's on the injury report with a groin issue. So this is obviously not something that's not good news. You don't want to have a long injury report. But the good news is that I do think that most, if not all of these guys will play, aside from obviously Sammy Watkins, he was placed on IR. I could see Christian Watson potentially missing some time. He was also on the injury report this week. So that will be definitely something that is interesting going into, because the Packers are not 100% healthy going into this game. That being said, neither are the Bucs. Their injury report is quite as long as well, and they're kind of dealing with the same issues. They have a lot of wide receivers that are out right now. They've got Chris Godwin's out. Michael Evans got suspended. Julio Jones is listed as questionable this week. I know that Russell Gage was also, I believe, is listed as out. So both teams are dealing with a plethora of injuries. So, again, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. How will each team take advantage of the fact that the other team isn't at full strength? For example, I expect both teams, as far as secondaries go, to have good games. Both the Packers and the Buccaneers are just beat up at wide receiver. There isn't a ton of experience on either side or for either team. Expect the safeties and the cornerbacks to have a good game. It's also going to be interesting to see how the younger players step up, especially, as I just mentioned, the receivers. More specifically for the Packers, because, again, I am a Packers fan, this is the team that I'm covering, I'm interested to see how Romeo Doubs will play, and if Christian Watson plays, how will they utilize him? Because if I'm being completely honest, it doesn't seem like they've had much of a game plan for him, aside from those jet sweep, kind of like quick pitches and that kind of stuff. And now to wrap up the injury report, the one last thing that I wanted to mention is that Juwan Winfrey was activated from the practice squad, so expect him to play. He's probably going to have a big role, and this is kind of what I called at the beginning of the year when he got cut. I kind of figured that, hey, if he's not going to make the 53-man roster at the beginning of the year, don't be surprised if at some point he's on it. So here we are. Now I want to talk about my keys to the game. I'm going to start with offense, as I normally do for the Packers. And my offensive key to the game for them is play 4 quarters of football. I know that kind of seems simple, but what I mean by that is just stay consistent. I do expect us to have moments in this game where we're either falling behind or struggling to move the ball. That's okay. Not every drive is going to result in points. What you can't do is make stupid, costly mistakes like turnovers, fumbles, that kind of stuff. Play a complete, clean game, and you give yourself at least a chance. Keep in mind that the Buccaneers defense is pretty good. Their front 7 alone is ridiculous, and their secondary is also pretty stacked. They've got one of the best young safeties in the league in Antoine Winfield. Levante David is one of the best linebackers in the game. They've obviously got Vita Vea on the defensive line. So they have playmakers. I expect the Packers offense to struggle. But that's why I say play 4 quarters of football, stick with it. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but pound the ball, run it. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon need to get lots of touches in this game for the Packers to have a chance, in my opinion. Additionally, I did go back and watch the tape from the Tampa Bay Saints game, and there are moments in that game where Mark Ingram and the Saints offensive line they're just moving the ball. They're making big holes. So it's not like you can't run on this team, but if you fall behind and you get kind of greedy and the runs aren't working out the way you need them to, so you decide to take a shot play, look, that's a big mistake. Jameis Winston threw 3 interceptions. The Saints had several opportunities in that game to come back, and they were moving the ball throughout that game. Stick with it. For the Packers this week, stick with it. Don't make the same mistakes that the Saints made last week. If it doesn't work out, if the run game isn't working out to begin with, just stick with it. I promise, be patient, and it will all work out how it's supposed to if everyone does their job. Moving on over to the defensive side of the ball, I have in big, bold letters, disrupt Tom Brady. He is not the same player that he used to be. He's still really good and can probably pick a defense apart if you let him. But if you can make them one-dimensional, shut the run game down, get in Tom Brady's face, disrupt him, he's not making the same throws that he was making 10 years ago. I really think that the defense has a good chance of making this a hard game for Brady, but only if it starts with stopping the run. And the Packers have struggled to stop the run in their first 2 weeks of the season. Leonard Fournette is a big bruiser of a back, and I expect him to have a good game. So that's why I said that the key was to stop Tom Brady. I don't really expect the Packers to stop Leonard Fournette. If they can contain him, great. But if you're going to beat the Buccaneers, I think you need to force Brady to make a mistake. Whether that be an interception or a bad handoff that leads to a fumble or, sacks, that kind of stuff. I do think that the defensive front has the playmakers to be able to get in Brady's face. And the other thing on top of that is the Buccaneers' offensive line has struggled a little bit as of, for the start of the season. They've got some young guys on that line, and I do believe that one of their starters is going to be out. So that's going to be another one of those big matchups to look at going into this game. I expect the Packers defense to take advantage of that. Now we'll see how the Buccaneers respond. And I do expect them to respond because this is a well-coached team. And I hate that I have to say this, but Tom Brady he wins a lot of games, and there's a reason that he wins a lot of games. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, now it's time to hop into my predictions for the game. And I'm not going to lie, I don't feel all that great going into it. I think this is going to be truly a tough matchup. I expect, as I said earlier, Leonard Fournette to have a monster of a game, and I honestly don't expect it to be very pretty. Now, while I do expect the offense to struggle starting in this game, similar to how they struggled last week and the week before, I do expect us to pick it up at some point. I think that Romeo Doubs is going to be getting a lot of workload this week. I've been reading some news reports that he's expected to have a larger load going into this game. So that will be interesting to see. I'm hoping that either Doubs or Watson could make a statement game. That would be awesome to see. That kind of breakout early season, show everyone, hey, I've got it. I belong in this league, and I can make plays. I don't expect these guys to be superstars coming right out of college, but it would be nice to see a superstar performance. And now finally I'm going to share my final score prediction. And right now I'm looking at 13-21 Buccaneers. Yeah, I don't expect the Packers to win this game. If they do, I'll be pleasantly surprised. But just the way that history tends to repeat itself, I expect us to struggle. And look, we're going against a really good football team, so starting the year 1-2 isn't the worst thing in the world, but it would definitely give the Packers a lot of work to do. And as I've mentioned several times throughout this episode alone, this game is probably going to have some later playoff implications. So in a couple weeks, we might be looking back at this game, analyzing it, thinking about it. We'll see. But that's about everything that I had for y'all today. I will be putting out a game reactions and analysis probably on Monday, sometime during the day after I'm done with work. So there's that to look forward to. But that's about everything that I had for this. I do want to thank you all for listening. It truly means the world to me. Feel free to like, comment, and share the podcast. You can find me anywhere on Spotify, Anchor, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And with that, I'm going to leave y'all with a Go Pack Go. Peace.